I'm so glad that we included this poem. It's entitled Non omnis moriar, the Latin words penned by Horace, saying, I shall not wholly die. I shall not wholly die. That was the watchword of Jewish writers and poets, the watchword of the ghetto archives. Even if you kill us, we'll leave traces, we'll leave documents, we'll leave words that will speak from beyond the grave. And that was the title that Zuzanna Ginczanka chose for this amazing poem. I admit that I'm haunted by this brilliant poet who was murdered by the Germans in 1944. Her first language was Russian. She grew up in the Yiddish-speaking town of Rovna, but somehow, for some reason, she embraced Polish culture, Polish poetry. And by the 1930s, the great poet Julian Tuwim had called her one of the rising stars of Polish literature. Zuzanna cut a large swath on the Warsaw literary scene, not just because of her poetry, but because of her striking physical presence. A colleague of hers said about her, quote, she had the beauty of a Byzantine icon. But unfortunately, because of her Jewish looks, when the war began, she had no way that she could pass as a Pole, and she was forced to hide. In 1942, her landlady betrayed her to the Gestapo. That time she escaped, and she writes this poem, which directly indicts Mrs. Choman, the woman who turned her in, and indicts all those others who betrayed Jews and who greedily held themselves to Jewish property. After the war, this poem was used as evidence in Choman's trial, and she was sentenced to 4 years in jail. And when we think about the Holocaust, let's ask ourselves, why did this talented, brilliant young woman have to die? For what? Why? And I'll just read you the first couple of lines of this poem. Non omnis moriar, my grand estate, tablecloths, invincible wardrobe, castles, acres of bed sheets, finely woven linens, colorful dresses will survive me. I leave no heirs. So let your hands rummage through Jewish things. You, Choman's wife from Lwów, you, mother of a Volksdeutscher, may these things be useful to you and yours. Well, one key difference, of course, was that while both of these young Polish Jews were brilliant poets, Sutzkever wrote his poems in Yiddish rather than Polish. And unlike Ginczanka, he felt a deep attachment to the Jewish collective, and especially to that magical city, Vilna, which we Jews always called Yerushalayim Belita, the Jerusalem of Lithuania. And in the Vilna ghetto, Sutzkever wrote poems in the face of death, facing death, in the firm belief that the act of writing and the integrity and beauty of a well-crafted, honest poem could transcend the terror of the ghetto and the finality of death. After the war, he would say, and I quote, when the very sun became like ashes, I believed with perfect faith that as long as poetry does not abandon me, lead will not destroy me. As long as I live my life as a poet in the valley of the shadow of death, my sufferings will merit tikkun and redemption. But in this particular poem, how? Sutzkever expresses a fear that many Jews in the ghettos felt. And I remember hearing this from my mother and from my aunts and uncles. The fear was that the real pain will begin at the very moment of liberation. When we no longer have to struggle to stay alive, that's when the loss will hit us. Our family, our people, our community, our Yiddish language are all gone. What's left? What will I do? And the first lines of this poem, how and with what will you fill your cup on the day you're free? Will you in your joy still hear the scream of the past?